Before I even unlocked the front door, I felt something was wrong. The porch light was on, and I could hear people laughing inside my beach house. This was not supposed to happen because I wasn't coming home until Monday. My business trip ended one day early, and I wanted to surprise my husband, Abney, with a quiet weekend together. Instead, I was the one who got the surprise. That beach house was never just a building to me. It was the last place where my mother truly smiled before cancer took her away. Every room held a memory of her. Every corner reminded me of the life we shared. I slowly opened the front door and stopped moving. Shoes I had never seen were covering the hallway. Children were running through my living room as if they had lived there for years. My furniture had been moved to different places. The family pictures of my mother and me were no longer hanging on the walls. It was as if someone had erased my life from my own home. I stood there trying to understand what I was seeing, but nothing made sense. Then I heard my mother-in-law laughing in the kitchen. She spoke without knowing I was standing only a few steps away. "This place finally feels like a real family home," she said with a smile. Those words hit me harder than anything else. My fingers became tight around my house keys, and my heart started beating faster. I looked around again, hoping this was some kind of mistake, but it wasn't. Someone had made big changes while I was away, and nobody had told me. The home my mother left to me no longer felt like mine. At that moment, I knew I had walked into something much bigger than a simple family visit. Before I could even ask what was happening, my father-in-law walked into the hallway holding my favorite coffee mug. It was the mug my mother had given me on my first birthday after I got married. He stopped when he saw me standing at the door. For just 1 second, surprise appeared on his face. I thought he would apologize or at least explain why everyone was inside my house. But instead, he gave me a calm smile, as if nothing was wrong. It was not the smile of a man who had been caught. It was the smile of someone who truly believed he belonged there. Then he looked at me and said, "Oh, you're back early." Those 4 words stayed in my mind. He did not say, "You're home." He said, "You're back." It sounded like I was visiting someone else's house instead of returning to my own home. Before I could answer, more people started coming from different rooms. My husband's sister walked out carrying a basket of laundry. One of the children ran past me without even noticing I was there. My mother-in-law came from the kitchen with a serving bowl in her hands. My brother-in-law was sitting on my sofa watching television like it was his daily routine. Nobody looked embarrassed. Nobody rushed to explain anything. Nobody even said they were sorry. Instead, they looked at me as though I had interrupted their peaceful family evening. It felt like I was the unexpected guest, not the owner of the house. Then I looked at Abney. He was standing near the dining table, completely silent. I waited for him to come to me. I waited for him to tell everyone this was my home, and that I deserved an explanation. But he didn't move. He didn't even look into my eyes. He kept staring at the floor as if he wanted to disappear. That silence hurt me more than any angry words ever could. At that moment, I realized this was not something that had happened by accident. This had been planned while I was away. Everyone in that house seemed to know what was happening except me. I felt alone in the place that had always made me feel safe, and for the first time since our marriage, I started wondering if I really knew the man I had trusted with my whole heart. I could not stay downstairs any longer. I quietly walked up the stairs, hoping at least the second floor had been left untouched. But the moment I reached my bedroom, my heart dropped. Again. The bed was in a different place. My dresser had been moved to another wall. My clothes had been packed into different drawers without anyone asking me. It felt like someone had walked through my private life and decided where everything should go. I slowly stepped into the guest room next. It no longer looked like the room I remembered. A baby crib stood near the window. Small toys were scattered across the floor. The closet was filled with children's clothes. It had been turned into a nursery. I stood there for a moment, trying to understand how so many changes had happened while I was away for only a few days. Then I walked toward the one room I feared seeing the most, my mother's old reading room. She loved that room more than any other place in the house. She spent hours there reading books, writing letters, and watching the ocean through the window. After she passed away, I promised myself I would never change it. I slowly opened the door, and my whole body became still. Her favorite chair was gone. The wooden bookshelves she had built with her own hands were completely empty. The soft blue walls she had chosen had been painted over with bright white paint. Every picture, every book, every little memory that made the room feel like hers had disappeared. It looked like she had never lived there at all. I could not believe someone had erased her from the house so easily. I stood there without moving, unable to find the right words. Then, as I looked around one last time, something caught my eye behind the long curtain near the window. I carefully pulled the curtain aside and found a small wooden seashell box covered with dust. My mother had always kept it hidden, and she never allowed anyone to open it. Somehow, everyone had missed it. I gently picked it up, wondering why it was the only piece of her they had failed to take away. The next morning, I woke up after sleeping only a few hours. My mind was full of questions, and I hoped a short walk outside would help me think clearly. I stepped onto the front porch and looked at the ocean, but even the peaceful view could not calm me. As I stood there, my elderly neighbor slowly walked toward me. She smiled kindly, but I could see she looked uncomfortable. She paused for a moment before quietly saying, "Kavira, we thought you gave them permission." I looked at her without saying a word. She seemed surprised by my expression. Then she asked, "You didn't know?" I slowly shook my head. Her face changed immediately. She realized I was hearing everything for the first time. She gently explained that moving trucks had arrived several days earlier. She had watched people carrying furniture, boxes, and suitcases into my house all afternoon. She believed I had planned everything because my husband's family looked so comfortable giving instructions to the workers. Before I could even think about what she had told me, another neighbor joined our conversation. He said he remembered seeing workers replacing the front door locks. At the time, he thought I wanted better security for the house. Another person walking by said they had seen my in-laws decorating the porch and bringing in new furniture. Someone else remembered seeing my husband's car parked outside almost every day while I was away. Every person shared another small piece of the story. None of them thought anything was strange because everyone believed I had approved it. No one imagined I knew nothing about it. With every conversation, the truth became harder to ignore. This had not happened in one afternoon. It had taken days of planning. People had packed boxes, moved furniture, painted rooms, changed locks, and settled into my home while I was hundreds of miles away. My husband had enough time to stop it if he wanted to, but he never did. That thought hurt more than anything else. I looked back at my beach house from across the street, and it no longer looked familiar. It felt like I had returned to someone else's life. For the first time, I realized this was never a misunderstanding. It was a plan that everyone seemed to know about except me. That evening, I finally decided to speak to Abani alone. I did not want another argument in front of his family. I only wanted one honest answer. I looked at him and quietly asked, "When did all of this happen?" It was a simple question, but he did not answer right away. He looked away for a moment before saying, "It's only temporary. My parents just needed a place to stay for a little while." His answer did not match what I had already seen. Temporary people do not repaint rooms, replace locks, and move family pictures. I reminded him of everything that had changed, but instead of explaining, he quickly changed his story. This time he said, "You are making this bigger than it is. It was all a misunderstanding." I stared at him in silence. A misunderstanding does not happen over many days with moving trucks, workers, and furniture. Nothing about this felt like a mistake. I asked him one more time to tell me the truth. After a long silence, he finally took a deep breath and spoke quietly. "Everyone believed you would eventually agree," he said. Those words hurt me more than anything else he had said. Believed, not asked. They had made a decision about my home without including me. They had planned my future without even giving me the chance to say yes or no. My opinion had never mattered to them. That night we all sat around the dinner table, but nobody spoke very much. Every time I asked another question, the room became quieter. One person looked at another before answering. Some people avoided my eyes. Others acted busy with their food. Every explanation created another question that nobody wanted to answer. I started noticing things I had ignored before. Small looks between family members. Long pauses before anyone spoke. It felt like everyone knew the full story except me. For the first time since I married Abani, I looked around that table and wondered if I truly knew these people at all. I had trusted them like family, but now they felt like strangers sitting inside my own home. After dinner, I carried my suitcase upstairs and began unpacking slowly. At first, everything looked normal, but then I started noticing small details that nobody else would ever recognize. My blue travel journal was missing from the top drawer where I always kept it. The silver picture frame that held my mother's favorite photograph had been replaced with a plain wooden one. A stack of storage boxes in the corner had been opened, even though each box was clearly labeled with my handwriting. I knew exactly how I had packed them before leaving for my trip. Someone had gone through my things carefully, not by accident. The more I looked around, the more I understood what had happened. They had not simply moved into my house. They had decided which parts of my life should remain visible and which parts should disappear. My mother's photos were missing from several rooms. Old letters she wrote to me were no longer in the desk drawer. Even the blanket she used during her last winter had been folded away into a closet I rarely opened. It felt as if someone had been editing my memories, removing anything that reminded them this home belonged to me and my mother long before they arrived. As I sat on the edge of the bed, I suddenly remembered the small seashell box I had found hidden behind the curtain in my mother's reading room. I walked back there and gently opened it for the first time in years. Inside were several folded papers, a small key, and a handwritten note in my mother's careful writing. I could still remember her voice the day she gave me the box. "Never throw these away, Kavira," she had said. At the time, I was younger and thought she was simply being sentimental. I had never asked why the papers mattered so much. Now, holding the box in my hands, I realized she had hidden it for a reason. Everyone had searched through the room, painted the walls, emptied the shelves, and removed her belongings, but they had missed the one thing she truly wanted me to keep. And, for the first time since coming home, I felt that my mother had left me something important that nobody else was meant to find. I decided not to confront my husband or his family again. I knew they would only give me more excuses. Instead, I started asking quiet questions to people who had known my mother for many years. I wanted to understand what she had planned before she passed away. My mother's oldest friend welcomed me into her home and listened carefully as I explained everything. She became quiet for a moment before saying, "Your mother always told me that this house was more than a place to live. She wanted it to stay exactly as she left it until the right time came." Those words stayed in my mind. The next day, I visited the family lawyer who had helped my mother with many important papers. At first, he could not remember much, but after looking through some old files, he smiled gently. He reminded me about a meeting I had attended years earlier. I had been young and still worried about my mother's illness, so I had forgotten almost everything that was discussed. He told me my mother had spoken with great care about protecting the beach house and making sure her wishes would always be respected. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the workshop of a local carpenter who had known my mother for many years. As soon as he heard her name, he remembered something unexpected. He told me she had planned several special renovations before she became too sick to continue. She wanted to preserve the house, not change its memories. She had even asked him to build hidden storage spaces to protect a few important family items, but the work was never finished. None of these conversations gave me one complete answer. Each person remembered only a small piece of the past. But when I put those pieces together, a different picture slowly appeared. My mother had made careful plans for this house long before she passed away. It was never just a beach house filled with old memories. It carried promises, wishes, and something far more important than anyone living inside it seemed to understand. As the days passed, the atmosphere inside the beach house became more uncomfortable. Everyone knew the problem could no longer be ignored. Family members started sharing their opinions, and soon they were no longer standing together. Some believed I was being unfair. They kept saying, "Family should share everything. A home is for everyone." They acted as if love meant giving up every personal boundary. They could not understand why I was so hurt. To them, it was only a house. They believed I should be happy that more family members wanted to live there. But not everyone agreed with them. A few relatives quietly admitted that things had gone too far. One of Ebony's cousins looked at me and said, "No one should move into another person's home without asking first." Another family member apologized for staying silent when the changes were happening. They confessed they had felt uncomfortable from the beginning, but were afraid to disagree with the rest of the family. For the first time, people stopped pretending everything was normal. Soon, the conversations were no longer about bedrooms, furniture, or who would live in the house. The real discussion became much deeper. Everyone started talking about respect. They talked about trust. They asked whether being family gave someone the right to make decisions for another person without permission. Some people believed good intentions were enough. Others believed love without respect could still cause deep pain. As I listened to everyone speaking, I realized this house had become much more than a piece of property. It was showing the truth about every relationship inside it. It revealed who respected my feelings and who believed my voice did not matter. It showed who valued honesty and who preferred making decisions behind closed doors. The beach house had become like a mirror. It reflected every person's character, every hidden opinion, and every choice they had made. In the end, I understood that this was never only about protecting my mother's home. It was about protecting the respect, trust, and love that should exist inside every family. Without those things, even the most beautiful house could never truly feel like home. One evening, I asked everyone to meet in the living room. My husband, his parents, and the rest of the family quietly took their seats. Nobody knew what I was going to say. I did not raise my voice. I did not blame anyone. I simply looked around the room and asked a few honest questions. If this house belonged to you, would you want someone to move in without asking? The room became silent. Then I asked another question. Why did everyone decide what was best for me without letting me speak? No one answered right away. They looked at each other, hoping someone else would speak first. The conversation continued for hours. One by one, people finally began sharing what they had been thinking. Some admitted they believed they were helping the family. Others confessed they had followed the group because they did not want to create problems. A few people quietly apologized for staying silent even though they knew it was wrong. My mother-in-law wiped tears from her eyes as she tried to explain why she thought living together would bring everyone closer. My father-in-law said he never wanted to hurt me, but he now understood that good intentions could not erase painful actions. Not every explanation felt honest. Some excuses sounded like they had been repeated many times before. A few family members still tried to defend their choices instead of accepting responsibility. But the longer we talked, the harder it became for anyone to deny the truth. This had never been about needing a place to stay. It had been about making decisions without respect for the person who owned the home. By the end of the night, everyone understood something. Something that could not be ignored anymore. A house does not stop feeling safe because strangers walk through the front door. It stops feeling safe when the people you love forget to respect your feelings, your memories, and your voice. Trust is what makes a house feel like home. Once that trust is broken, even the strongest walls cannot protect the people living inside. That night changed every relationship in the room because, for the first time, everyone faced the truth together. Months passed, and little by little, life became peaceful again. The beach house finally felt warm and safe, just as it had before everything changed. Not every relationship survived what had happened. Some family members chose to walk away instead of accepting responsibility for their actions. Others realized their mistakes and worked hard to earn back my trust. I learned that not every relationship is meant to last forever, and sometimes peace comes from letting go of the people who refuse to respect you. The people who remained in my life were different now. They no longer made decisions for me. They listened before speaking, asked before acting, and respected the boundaries that should have been there from the beginning. Trust did not return in one day, but it slowly grew again through honesty and kindness. One quiet afternoon, I opened the small box where I had carefully kept my mother's old wind chime. I carried it outside and hung it in its original place on the front porch. It was exactly where my mother had always wanted it to be. As I stepped back and looked at it, I smiled for the first time in many months. That evening, the cool ocean breeze gently moved through the porch, and the wind chime began to ring once again. Its soft sound filled the house, bringing back memories of peaceful days with my mother. This time, those memories no longer made me feel only sadness. They reminded me of her love, her strength, and everything she had taught me. Standing on the porch, I looked across the ocean and finally understood the lesson this journey had given me. A home is never measured by its size, its beauty, or the number of people living inside it. A real home is built with trust, respect, and love. The people who truly belong there are the ones who protect your memories instead of replacing them. Love should never ask you to stay silent or accept being ignored. It should make you feel heard, valued, and safe. As the wind chime continued to sing in the evening breeze, I knew my mother's house had become a home once again, not because everything was perfect, but because the people inside finally understood the true meaning of respect. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you came home and found your family living in your house without asking? Your answer might be featured in the next story.